A tourist, confident in his immunity, reached for the royal guard's hat, but one unexpected move made the crowd gasp, turning his boldness into a humiliating spectacle. The morning chill embraced London, awakening the city to life. Tourists crowded outside Buckingham Palace, snapping photos and exchanging excited exclamations. Amid the familiar noise, the solitary figure of a royal guard stood out. Thomas Kingsley, a 28-year-old man with a square jaw and a posture that could impress even a general, embodied discipline itself. His scarlet tunic, perfectly pressed and adorned with gleaming buttons, contrasted with the tall bearskin hat perched atop his head, a proud symbol of Britain's majesty. For Thomas, this post was more than just a job. He understood that every gesture, every movement, was part of a centuries-old tradition. It seemed as though he could withstand anything, the noise of the crowd, loud remarks, even mockery. But today held a test that would challenge his patience. The crowd buzzed like a hive, and one voice rose above the rest. It belonged to Mark Wilson, a tourist from the United States. Clad in flag-patterned shorts, a bright t-shirt reading, "London is my playground," and a baseball cap tilted to the side, Mark exuded overconfidence. In his hand, he held a phone recording everything. "Hey, buddy, are you a robot? Come on, crack a smile," Mark shouted as he strutted toward Thomas with a smug grin. The crowd parted, giving him space. Some chuckled, others shook their heads in disapproval. But Mark didn't care. He wanted a show, and he thought the guard was the perfect target. Thomas remained motionless, like a statue. His gaze stayed fixed ahead, his expression unflinching. The silence only fueled Mark's bravado. "Well then," Mark drawled, playing up for the audience. "What if I—" He took a step forward and reached for Thomas's bearskin hat. The tension in the crowd became palpable. Cameras captured the moment as Mark crossed the invisible boundary, the sacred line between respect and insolence. Thomas, still unmoving, stared straight ahead, his unwavering demeanor speaking volumes. "What's the matter? Are you even human or just a fancy mannequin?" Mark smirked, but his voice wavered slightly. The crowd held its breath, watching his attempt to provoke the immobile guard. Finally, someone in the crowd couldn't hold back. "That's disgraceful, sir. These men serve the Queen, not your entertainment." Mark waved off the comment. "I'm paying for this show. He better do something," he muttered, though his confidence was beginning to falter. Like ice under the sun, it melted under the weight of Thomas's silent disdain. The guard didn't move, but his unyielding stillness was a powerful response. It was a message clear to everyone, except Mark. Hearing his friends laugh, Mark felt like the star of the show. He turned toward his companions with a smug grin, clearly reveling in the attention. "Watch and learn, guys. This is how you have fun," he declared, pulling a shiny coin from his pocket. His voice was loud, his movements exaggerated. Standing in front of Thomas like an actor before his stage, he tossed the coin at the guard's feet. "Here's a tip for you, Mr. Serious," he added, clearly expecting the crowd to laugh. The coin landed with a faint clink on the cobblestones, resting near Thomas's polished boot. For a moment the crowd fell silent, trying to process what had just happened. A few chuckled, but most responded with quiet disapproval. "Shameful," muttered an elderly man with a cane standing nearby. "These men have more honor than half the Parliament." Mark, seemingly oblivious to both Thomas's expressionless stance and the crowd's reaction, decided to push further. For him, this was a performance, and he believed the audience wanted more. "Now he's got to do something," he said, glancing at his friends for approval, as if needing their validation. He stepped over the white line, a clearly marked boundary. Tourists were forbidden to cross. The crowd gasped, and cameras went up again. Mark reached out toward Thomas's bearskin hat, as if to grab it. The space between them felt charged, almost tangible. Before his fingers could reach the hat, Thomas moved. His step forward was sharp and deliberate. The sound of his boots striking the cobblestones echoed like thunder, making the crowd step back. "Sir, you have crossed a restricted area. Step back immediately," Thomas said in a low, firm voice. Mark recoiled, as though hit by an invisible force. The grin that had dominated his face just moments ago vanished instantly. He stood frozen, unable to look away from Thomas, who, though not directly gazing at him, commanded an overwhelming presence. "That was incredible," someone in the crowd murmured, followed by a ripple of appreciative laughter. "Care to continue?" the elderly man asked hoarsely, glaring at Mark with disdain. Mark glanced around, seeking support from his friends, but they remained silent. Struggling to maintain his dignity, he stammered. "Well, okay then, Mr. Robot, relax." But his voice was uncertain, almost pitiful. The crowd had made its judgment, and no one found his antics amusing anymore. A collective air of disapproval hung in the air. Thomas resumed his stance, motionless once again. His unshakable composure spoke louder than words. To everyone watching, he was the embodiment of honor and discipline. The crowd buzzed with chatter. Some clapped, others shook their heads. But one thing was clear. Mark had lost with no chance of recovery. Not far away, the sound of a child crying broke the silence that had settled after Mark's loud antics. In the stillness, the cry seemed especially piercing. A 7-year-old boy, clutching his mother's hand, stood near the fence, pointing at the tourist with tear-filled eyes. "Mommy, he's bad! He's bullying the soldier!" The boy sobbed, his pure, honest voice echoing what the crowd seemed to be thinking. Thomas, previously motionless, turned his head slightly, drawn by the sound of the boy's crying. His gaze lingered on the child for only a moment, but it was enough to heighten the tension in the air. Mark, as if emboldened by the renewed attention, stepped forward once more. His face twisted into a malicious grin. "Let's see what happens now," he shouted, reaching out to finally snatch Thomas's bearskin hat. His actions no longer carried any humor, only the stubbornness of someone who refused to accept defeat. But before Mark's fingers could touch the hat, Thomas moved. With unwavering composure, he took a half-step backward and gently tilted his head. Unprepared for this maneuver, Mark lost his balance. His feet slipped, and with a loud, awkward thud, he crashed onto the cobblestones. The crowd gasped. For a moment, there was utter silence, broken only by the sharp voice of the elderly man with the cane. "Karma!" The word ignited a ripple of laughter through the crowd. Mark lifted his head, his face burning with humiliation. Around him, people were laughing, and more than a few had their phones raised, recording his downfall. Just moments ago, he had been the center of attention, but now he had become the butt of the joke. Unfazed by Mark's collapse, Thomas turned and marched toward the crying boy. His movements were precise and deliberate, as if he were on parade. The crowd instinctively parted, creating a clear path for the guard. Reaching the boy, Thomas lowered his head slightly, meeting the child's eyes. "It's all right, young sir. That man won't bother anyone anymore," he said in a deep, calm voice that sounded like a solemn promise. The boy froze, wiping his tears, before offering a small smile. His mother nodded at Thomas, her expression filled with gratitude as she hugged her son close. The crowd, recognizing the significance of the moment, burst into applause. "Now that's a real hero," someone said, their words blending into the wave of admiration. Mark, still sitting on the ground, looked around in confusion. His attempt to reclaim his spotlight had ended in disgrace, yet Thomas did not spare him so much as a glance. Instead, the guard turned and strode confidently back to his post, where he resumed his impeccable stance. The crowd continued to clap and cheer. Someone shouted, "Down with people like Mark! Long live the guard's honor!" Mark slowly got to his feet, brushing off the dirt from his clothes. His face was beet red, and his eyes darted around the crowd in search of support, but none was offered. The videos filmed on countless phones were already making their way across the internet, cementing Mark's legacy as a symbol of disrespect and failure. Thomas, standing silently at his post, had proven through his actions that honor and dignity could withstand any provocation. Lying on the cobblestones, Mark awkwardly tried to get up, his movements clumsy, as though weighed down by the absurdity of his situation. His face, flushed with humiliation, became a target for the crowd's mocking stares and disapproving remarks. Yet he still attempted to save face. "Well, that was funny," he mumbled, forcing a weak smile. His voice was faint, as though pleading for a shred of sympathy. The crowd, however, was unmoved. A voice rang out, clear and confident, from a young woman holding a camera. "This is live streaming! Ready to be meme of the year?" Laughter rolled through the crowd like a tidal wave. Mark froze, his eyes darting between the woman and the dozens of phones still pointed at him. Only now did he realize that everything he had done was already public. Panic crept into his voice. "Come on, it was just a joke," he tried to explain, but his tone lacked conviction. The crowd hummed with disdain, some filming his embarrassment, others hurling sarcastic comments, while still more simply watched with evident contempt. At that moment, a police officer approached. His steps were deliberate, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, you need to leave the area, immediately." Mark opened his mouth to protest but stopped when he met the officer's steady gaze and the silent judgment of the crowd. Without a word, he obeyed, gathering what little dignity he had left. As he walked away, he understood fully that his bravado had evaporated, leaving only a shadow of shame. Meanwhile, Thomas remained unaffected, quietly returning to his post. He adjusted his bearskin hat, which was still in perfect condition, and resumed his stance, as though nothing had happened. His composure was not just a testament to his discipline, but a silent reminder of the dignity embodied by tradition. The boy, now smiling, waved at Thomas. In response, the guard gave a slight, measured nod. Though small, the gesture drew another round of applause from the crowd. "Now that's professionalism," someone remarked. "A true hero of our time," the elderly man with the cane added, looking at Thomas with respect. As the crowd slowly dispersed, buzzing with excitement over what they had witnessed, phones continued to capture the final moments of the scene. The videos were already spreading across social media, accompanied by captions celebrating the honor and resilience of the guards. Amid it all, Thomas remained steadfast, an enduring symbol of honor and discipline. For him, it was just another day on duty, but for those who had witnessed it, he was a living reminder that true greatness lies in standing firm with dignity and respect.